first member of a NASCAR Winston Cup team to arrive at the track? And who is the last to leave? It might not be who you think. We'll find out shortly.
Also, cylinder head inspection. It may not be grueling, but it is thorough. And we'll look and see exactly what the inspectors are looking for. All that and more coming up today on NASCAR Garage. First up this week, travel. It's a way of life for every NASCAR Winston Cup team.
And while many team members will fly from race to race, there is at least one who will make the drive to each and every event.
Most valuable members of any NASCAR Winston Cup team is the transport driver, the first one at the track and the last to leave.
It was a good combination where I didn't have to beat the highway every day as a regular trucker might do and still enjoy racing. We just got back from Texas testing yesterday afternoon late, and all the men in the shop and myself, we unloaded the truck and started preparing it to turn it around to go to Darlington Speedway today.
Loading and unloading, these brightly colored rigs carry everything needed to win a NASCAR Winston Cup race. They usually arrive the day before the track opens.
6 o'clock in the morning, and NASCAR will start parking the NASCAR trucks. And we'll park by points. And 7 o'clock, the crews will come in, and we'll start our normal work day. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll start qualifying. I get to park in the #1 position. The reason being is since last year we won the championship, this transporter gets to park in the very first position all year long, no matter where we happen to fall in the point standing.
With as many as 45 to 50 haulers to park in the garage area, the NASCAR officials have their hands full, trying to squeeze the trucks as close together as possible. In an effort to keep the playing field equal, nothing is unloaded until 7 a.m., when all the teams are allowed to enter into the garage area. With everyone helping, it doesn't take long to unload. Then the preparation for practice and qualifying begins.
So everyone has a basically assigned job, but everyone also works together. As they're just done with their job, they may just move on and help someone else with theirs.
Throughout the weekend, Bob does whatever needs be done to help his team get ready for another NASCAR Winston Cup race. Truly a valuable asset to his team.
He is as important a member of the team as anybody here. You tell you what, you trust anybody to run $1 million up and down the road day in and day out. And you asked a lot of a truck driver, and in my opinion, he's as important as anybody on the team, the driver, the crew chief, the team guys, or anything else. He races right there with the rest of them.
I'm happy with where I'm at, and I like driving this pretty shiny rig.
The pride of each team is reflected in their motivation to be the best on and off the track. At the end of the weekend, the process of getting home begins.
The loading process is just a reverse of the unloading. Everything has its place in the truck, and it all has to get back there in order for it all to fit. And as far as leaving the racetrack, you just basically wait your turn and don't get excited, I guess, and it'll all work out. I guess the hardest thing about my job is the long hours, and when you times that by 32 races, having a day off once in a while, that's probably what you miss. Having a little time around the house, and as I'm getting older, having a little time around the house is important. So, but I love racing, so I just keep going.
You know, Chris, I bet the transport driver probably logs more miles in a season than the driver does.
I think there's no question about that. You see him pounding down the highway all the time. Now, coming up on NASCAR Garage, a look at how aerodynamics affect the performance of a NASCAR Winston Cup racer and your car at home. Stay right there. Coming up, a laboratory full of parts and gizmos and beakers full of funny-looking fluid. Now, we found just such a lab in the middle of a NASCAR Winston Cup garage, and in a few moments, we're going to see exactly what it's for.
But first, Chris has an aerodynamic performance report.
The art of moving air around a NASCAR Winston Cup racer takes up a lot of time, not only from NASCAR itself, but crew chiefs and manufacturers. They all study it intently. Today, we're going to focus on air dams and spoilers. With us, Preston Miller, the manager of Ford's NASCAR program. Preston, the air dam is here. That's the important part.
That's correct. This is the departure from the production car. From the bumper down, we're allowed to put a device called an air dam on these cars to manage the air. The idea is to keep the air from going under the car. That adds more downforce to the front of the car and less drag to the car.
And it's adjustable down along this lower ridge.
This red strip here is adjustable on nearly all the cars for the final tuning that the crew chief can do as the car goes through its final inspection before qualifying and before the race.
Now, the work this is doing is directly tied to work that's being done back there, and it's tied together by necessity.
It is, and this is the downforce package, we call it. This regulates the front downforce, the spoiler on the deck lid, the rear downforce.
Okay, we're going to talk more about this front of the car in a few moments, but first, let's go look at that spoiler.
Okay.
Seems to me, other than sheer horsepower, this piece is the most discussed and debated on the car.
Certainly is. This is the rear spoiler. It counts for the rear downforce of the car and a good measure of the drag on the car. It's different in that it's not on a production car, at least in this form, and it's closely regulated by NASCAR to keep the makes of cars to have the same aero characteristics.
Okay, and of course the dimensions here, the geometry of the deck and where it ties in is all legislated.
That's correct. Indeed, at Daytona Talladega, they have an exact piece of aluminum that lays right over this spoiler, and you have to be within that dimension.
And that means that these braces, no matter what form they take, are incredibly important.
Well, they're very important at Daytona Talladega because if your spoiler angle is less than minimum when you come off the track after qualifying or the race, you're disqualified.
And these are very, very strong, but on short tracks and other tracks, they take a little different form.
They do. They'll use a turnbuckle or some type of adjustable device so that they can run this angle up or down, and really they'll run it up as high as 75, 80 degrees on occasion and down as low as maybe 45 or 30 on a short track, depending on what they feel like doing. Usually it's the 70 degree is more like it.
And what about this little copper wire here? That's not aerodynamic.
No, this just shows you the inspector has been here and left his mark. This secures these bolts, mounting bolts, so that he knows this spoiler has now been checked. It's been proven to be in the right place, and it's good for racing or qualifying.
Okay, once they reach the optimum with this piece, again, we can tie it together with the front with a little bit of tuning.
That's correct. That's the aero package we're talking about.
I think there's three areas we need to look at. Let's start up top with the cold air box right here.
Okay, the cold air box is new for this season. You have the option of using it or not using it. If you use it, you get about 100 pounds more front downforce, so it's significant.
And it's a big decision right there, as well as along the side, right here.
This is a tuning area that we've had in the past. It's limited this year that the sheet metal cannot be wider than the sidewall of the tire. Also, the adjustable struts that we used during races before are no longer allowed. You have to fix this before you start the race now.
Got to have good test data for that to work.
Certainly.
Around in front, again, we go back to the air dam. The object of the exercise, keep it from loading up. Once you accomplish that, you can start letting it in at your own discretion using tape.
Of course, the reason to let it in is for cooling of the engine, and the teams start the race with the minimum amount of tape that they think they can get by with if they have a heating problem, or if they want to reduce front downforce, then they remove tape. But as I say, removing the tape, it decreases front downforce, increases drag, so that's not usually something they want to do. Also, if they have high oil temperature, this opening over here is for the oil.
Okay, what, after accumulating all this knowledge, is the payoff for Ford Motor Company?
Well, we believe that this is a good environment to test engineers, and certainly at 200 miles an hour gives you significantly bigger changes in data than you would get from 55-mile-an-hour testing, and we're real happy with our participation in this series for that reason.
Thanks, Preston.
Thank you.
So there you have it. There is indeed a correlation between what a NASCAR Winston Cup driver and his team learns about handling this at about 200 miles an hour and what you and I know about driving and handling our car as we drive it on the street.
NASCAR inspectors go to great lengths before each race, checking engine specs. Then after the race, the winner, the pole winner, the first runner-up, and a randomly chosen car are checked again. One area involved in both those inspections is the cylinder heads. This is Derek Cope's number 36 Pontiac Grand Prix, and right now it's going through the pre-race inspection. Ryan, what is it Gary's looking for here?
Well, this is the first thing we do. We have a crew member take and loosen and remove the valve cover.
I'm looking to see the date that it was manufactured, and also that the cylinder head has the NASCAR-approved part number on it.
Then we have a crew member loosen the rocker arms and remove the spark plug for that cylinder that we picked to P&G that weekend.
Now, we hear P&G a lot. Why don't you go ahead and define that, Gary?
P&G's pumping gauge, and it measures the volume of the cylinder.
Then we take this pumping gauge. We have a special fitting that screws into the spark plug, and then we hook the hose up to it. We have a crew member take and turn the engine over, and it pushes the air out of the cylinder, and it will rise this plunger up to a certain point. We take and read what it reads on the gauge, multiply that times 8, and that gives us a cubic inches for that engine.
Now, what do NASCAR guidelines call for?
It must be between 350 and 358 cubic inches.
Okay, Kevin, turn it over. And the next thing we check is the amount of compression the engine has. We take this sonic whistler, which bounces sound waves off the top of the piston and gives us the compression of the engine.
Now, what are NASCAR specs for this?
It can be no more than 14.0 to 1. Go ahead and rock this top dead center.
We've seen how intricate the pre-race inspection is, but that's nothing compared to how meticulous the inspectors get during the post-race inspection.
That's right, Leslie. This head was the original head that was submitted to NASCAR from the manufacturer for approval. We keep this head under lock and key. We use this head to make templates like this intake port template to ensure that the intake ports on this head are still in their stock location.
The next step is to take and check the location of the valves. They must remain in the stock location. This tool is used to look down through to see the alignment is still correct. Then we check the angle of the cylinder head, which this tool fits on and checks the angle. 18 degrees on a Chevrolet and 7.5 on a Ford.
Now, what's this over here?
Well, Lisa, that's a barrette that we use. That barrette holds a known volume of liquid. We use it to take and pour the valve chamber to find the volume of the valve chamber, and that's part of the process of checking the compression on the engine.
Pretty detailed stuff.
Leslie, it's really interesting that they only measure one cylinder and then multiply by 8.
Well, it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. With 40-plus cars coming through, saves a ton of time. Stay with us. Coming up, we'll look at another step in the process of building a NASCAR Winston Cup racing machine from the ground up.
Next on NASCAR Garage, Leslie takes us on a trip down memory lane for a look at a track built on old tobacco and cotton fields, and next to a minnow pond.
The creation of a NASCAR tradition in the beginning of the super speedway era was initiated in 1949 between two farmers with a handshake. Harold Brazington, a South Carolina peanut farmer, had finished 4th in the 1938 Daytona race. Knowing that others in his hometown shared his love for racing, an idea was born. Another gentleman named Sherman Ramsey owned the land that would become Darlington Raceway, and he's the one NASCAR fans can thank for the unique shape and character here at Darlington. Brazington broke ground in December of 1949 on what was to become NASCAR's first paved super speedway, intending to carve a true oval. But Mr. Ramsey, having contributed the land, held one provision, that his minnow pond, which lay just outside of what was to be turn 2, remain undisturbed. So the first and second turns were drawn in, giving the 1¼ mile track its egg-shaped layout. The track, Too Tough to Tame, opened for business on Labor Day 1950 with the first Southern 500. Johnny Mance of Long Beach, California, won that race. In 1953, turns 1 and 2 saw an increase in banking to 23 degrees and were lengthened a bit. That took the track from a published 1 1/4 to 1 3/8 miles. A remeasurement in 1970 changed that to 1.366 to be exact. Bound on one side by the state highway and by private land on the other, Darlington had continued to upgrade, but not expand until recently. Land adjoining the backstretch stands finally came available, and many changes are in the works. Not the least of these is a switch in the position of the start-finish line to the opposite side of the track. Other improvements include a new tower, grandstands, television, radio, and NASCAR control facilities, tire and fuel depots, and a brand new victory lane. Despite all the changes, though, the configuration of the track remains unchanged, and she will continue to be known as the track Too Tough to Tame.
We're showing you the process of building a NASCAR Winston Cup racer from the ground up. Now, these 3 cars have been to the track and raced and are in various stages of rebuild. They'll be used again. Our car is just back from the paint shop and is in the stages of final assembly. We're pulling it all together. We're at Hendrick Motorsports, a huge complex just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, where car builder Mike Slattery is going to show us those final steps. Well, Mike, a lot of the final assembly's already been done. The engine is in, small block Chevrolet, 358 cubic inches. What's the horsepower number?
About 720.
I just love the ring of that. Now, what's Red doing up here in the front?
Right now, Red has just installed our upper fan shroud. Right now, he's putting on the cover to our ductwork. This is all homemade right here.
And Red makes it, as a matter of fact.
He does.
What about some of the hose work through here?
This is a number 20 steel braided line. This attaches the upper radiator to our engine. These fittings right here are about $65 a piece.
And this part of the radiator system as well. But down below, I notice it's just a regular rubber hose, just like I'd buy at my gas station.
It is. It's a standard radiator hose you can pick up at most auto parts stores, as well as the fan belts.
Now, let's move over here real quickly. This is called a crush panel. It ties the firewall into the outer skin and helps with the shape, but there's more to it than just that.
There is. That panel also keeps the fumes away from our driver and back in the engine compartment. Very good on a long day.
Very important on a long Sunday afternoon. Now, Red, if you would, I know that there is a cold air box that needs to go on here. Mike, if you could get that. Red, if you'd take us through it and show us exactly how that's installed, because we know it has a lot to do with the performance of the car.
Yes, first we have the bottom of the air box sits on the carburetor. Then we have a 4-inch air cleaner. You can buy that at your auto parts. Then we got the top that goes on. Then the cowl drops in. And the cowl will seal the outside air to the air cleaner, and it's all sealed up.
Nothing gets away. It all goes to the engine.
Nothing gets away.
Okay. Now, while the wheels are off, let's go down below and take a look at the brakes.
What Dale's just completed is installing our brake caliper. These calipers are extra heavy duty for short track racing. This is a Martinsville caliper as well as a rotor.
Well, in Martinsville, with the long straightaways and the tight corners, they really get on them hard, don't they?
They do.
Okay, now, down in the right front, the air intake, a little different.
That's a carbon fiber brake duct. What we do there is take the air in through the front of the car, through hoses that blow cold air onto our rotor and caliper.
For cooling.
For cooling.
Okay, let's go look at the cockpit. Well, Red's just finishing up some details inside. What exactly is he doing now?
Well, Chris, Red's just finishing installing our instrument panel. He's turning his last cam lock now.
Okay, he's got locked down now. Keep me honest on this, guys. I'll see if I can do the litany. This is the ignition system we're using. This starts it. That's the key to the car, right? Backup ignition, couple of cooling blowers, voltmeter, tachometer, oil pressure, water temperature, oil temperature, fuel pressure. Did I get it right?
Perfect.
Okay. What else do we do?
As you can see, our wiring is complete. Roll bar padding's already installed. Fire extinguishing system's in here. Our seat, which is custom built to Terry Labonte. Every seat's built to the driver's measurements. The steering column's installed. This whole area is within 1/8 of an inch of where Terry likes it. Everything is right to height, fits him to a T.
And we're almost done with the race car.
Just about there.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Chris.
And there you have it. We're very close to the final construction of our NASCAR Winston Cup racer. Next time, I promise you, we will be finished. If you have questions or comments, write us at NASCAR Garage, care of TNN Viewer Services, 2806 Opryland Drive, Nashville, Tennessee, 37214. And be sure to visit NASCAR Garage online at NASCAR.com.
Chris, no one could have predicted what Harold Brasington started when he built Darlington. Not a hotel or major city anywhere in sight, but still 30,000 fans show up for the first Southern 500.
Well, it was the first 500-mile stock car race on a paved oval, and now with the renovations, it's going to be just beautiful. Come back and see us again next time for our next edition of NASCAR Garage.
We'll see you then.